the mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
The views and opinions expressed by A Little Bit Culty are those of the hosts and don't reflect the official policy or position of the podcast. Any of the, quote, fire content provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are the opinion and are not intended to malign a religion, a group, a club, an organization, business individual, anyone or anything, unless, Sarah?
You're a douchebag.
Yeah. We're not doctors, psychologists, therapists, licensed counselors, or shamans, even though you kind of think you are sometimes.
I'm like an urban shaman. Okay. Good talk. Hey, everybody. Sarah Edmondson here.
And I'm Anthony Ames, a.k.a. Nippy, Sarah's husband, and you're listening to
A Little Bit Culty,
a.k.a. ALBC, a podcast about what happens when devotion goes to the dark side.
We've been there and back again. A little about us. True story. We met and fell in love in a cult. And then we woke up and got the hell out of Dodge.
And the whole thing was captured in the HBO docuseries The Vow, now in its second season.
I also wrote about our experience in my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life.
Look at us, a couple of married podcasters who just happen to have a weekly date night where we interview experts and advocates in things like cult awareness and mind control.
Wait. This does not count toward date night, babe. We got to schedule that. That's separate.
So it's 2 days we got to hang out?
We do this podcast thing because we learned a lot on our exit ramp out of NXIVM. Still on that journey, and we want to pay the lessons forward with the help of other cult survivors and whistleblowers.
We know all too well that culty things happen. It happens to people every day across every walk of life. So join us each week to tackle these culty dynamics, everywhere from online dating to mega churches and multi-level marketing.
This stuff really is everywhere. The cultiverse just keeps on expanding, and so are we. Welcome to Season 5 of A Little Bit Culty, serving cult content and word salads weekly on your favorite podcast platforms. Learn more at alittlebitculty.com.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Welcome back to Part 2 with Isabella Constantino. If you didn't listen to Part 1, please press pause and go back because it won't make sense. Enjoy Part 2 with Isabella Constantino. Well, you said something about how you were too young to see the red flags, which I think that's the case for all of us. But now looking back and doing the healing that you've done, what were some of the red flags along the way that had you known what you know now, you would have gotten the fuck out?
I mean, I think for all of us, having been manipulated in those specific ways, it's easier to see those specific ways of manipulation. So knowing what I know now, I would have seen them. So I don't know.
Well, you had a lot of buy-in. You had Mark, who's pretty trustworthy as a salesperson, your parents who are buying in. So in a lot of ways, you were trusting the people around you, it sounds like, more so than considering red flags.
Yeah, I think my parents saw more of the red flags than I did, but
You really wanted to do it.
yeah, and I mean, we were all desperate. I mean, Tourette's and OCD had affected, all of our lives for a very long time. And my parents are amazing and always trying to help me find effective treatments and find things that would help me and help me do that. I mean, it was so much a part of all of our lives that I think the idea of it getting better was, I think they were going in with their eyes wide open, having read the articles and more aware of that than I was.
What was the time frame from when you joined? What year did you join?
I joined the end of 2014.
Okay, so you were there for 3 years.
Yeah, I was there for basically, I enrolled the day after I turned 21. I left the week I turned 24.
And a lot of our questions from our audience on Patreon, they wanted to know things about that time period. Like, how did you first hear about what was going on, and what was your reaction?
So I was pretty diehard. A lot of the stuff that came out, I didn't believe the stuff in the papers, basically after you and Nippy left and Mark left and Bonnie and everyone, there's kind of a mass exodus. A lot of people were gone, and the abuse and the control tactics really doubled down, and it felt very dark.
Well, the light was leaving the building.
Yeah. But they were doing more and more to create narratives around whatever was coming out against them. Like literally the curriculum was changing around what was happening in the outside world. Like whether it's hearing about branding, hearing about the women's group, hearing about whatever, it would just morph to benefit the company at any point in time, even if that meant the story completely contradicted the one before, but they made it make sense somehow, and you just had to ignore any inconsistencies. You filled them in yourself. So it was very hard to know. It's like at the root of it, if you trusted the company, you still believed them.
What was the tipping point? Because you trusted them. You didn't believe what was being said. How did you decide to leave in the middle of the night?
I think enough things had happened. There was a few things. So at the end, enough had come out that people knew on some level what was happening. But I think everyone on some level didn't trust each other. It seemed like everyone was very on guard. Everyone was very on edge. And no one knew how to kind of, maybe it was just me, but I don't think it was, interact, at least in the Albany area, because that was where a lot of it was happening. Like anyone you looked at, you're like, what do they know? What's going on? So basically, just in a nutshell, I guess, how I left was they were asking us to, keep everything inside the community. I remember there was a community meeting once that basically like compared us to the Amish. Like even if someone can do a better job outside of the community, stay loyal to the community, hire within the community. But no one had money. Everyone was drained of their resources, of their time, of everything. So like no one had money to give. Everyone was it was like an empty well that we're all trying to draw from each other and everything. And I think I had finally like gotten to the point, like I'd started eating a bit more again. I, got a car. I had a little bit more autonomy in that way. And I was like, I have to find a job. I have to find some version of a normal life so that I can stay here and be a part of this community. I have to do other things. And I think the universe kind of just like heard that and was like, here you go. Because I was actually trying to apply for a job that day. And I got a call from a friend who had left like 6 months earlier during the like exodus. And she was basically like, hey, I hope you're doing well. I'm here getting stuff from storage. Don't tell anyone I'm here, but I'd love to see you. Do you want to catch up? And I was like, absolutely. Don't worry. I didn't know what was going on, but I just obviously like, I won't say anything. And I had been asked to commit to like 2 coaching courses or ethos courses a week by Nancy because I couldn't afford to pay for it. So they sponsored me to do it. And so I was having like an ethical dilemma. Like, do I go to this course or do I see my friend? And I literally walked into the center and just walked back out again. And I went to the diner where we met, and basically she comes in and she says, Isabella, like, I don't know what you know. I don't know, what you've been told. And if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. We'll just catch up about other things. But if you have any questions, I'm an open book. And I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on. And she filled in some things that were kind of the final puzzle pieces that made the other little red flags along the way click. And I was like, oh shit, like, I get it. Like, this was not good. There was deception. They knew what was happening, and actually, well, she was involved with the vow, and that's how I got involved. And she since, had dropped out, but that's how we got the footage of me moving out in the middle of the night and everything. Basically, she was like, come with us now. We have the van, you can come to New York and see so-and-so who's left, and so-and-so will be there. I was like, I have to work tomorrow. I don't know if I can get anyone to cover because I was working at a gas station full-time or like part-time. And basically, I was like, okay, this is important. I need to find out more of what's going on. So the next day, I drove to Brooklyn, ended up spending a couple days with her and with other people who defected and found out more. And I was like, basically, I didn't realize how bad it was. And I was like, well, you know what? Like, I'm in the Tourettes study. They're holding that up. Maybe that gives me some leverage. Maybe we can still save it. And she was like, yeah, maybe. And our other friend was like, fuck no, you have to get out like now. And I was like, oh, okay. So basically, we took the van that she'd used a couple days prior and just went back in the middle of the night. I lived with like 4 or 5 women in Doss at one point, and then like 3, and I had no idea what was going on. So I don't know. That was just, we're trying to be careful. And there was an ethical movie night that night. So we just went at like almost at midnight, just because we were running late. It happened to be the middle of the night. Threw everything in a van with me, her, another friend, and the camera guy, and raced back to Brooklyn. Got there at like 5, and that's kind of just how everything started.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I got out.
Fuck.
That's when we started talking, right?
Yeah, like a day later or something.
I do remember that conversation well. And I remember the conversation, I don't know if you want to talk about it, where there was a conversation, not the one that was in the vow that everyone watched and was like cheering your steadfastness against Mark's gaslighting. But there was another one earlier days than that, if I recall. I don't know the timeline, but it was a call where you were like, I can't talk to him because he is head fucking me or something. And I was like, I'll get on the call. So we did a 3-way call.
That was a few months after.
Mhm.
It was a few months after. Okay. So
Mhm.
that was like, I remember being on a call with you and him. He didn't know
you were
that I was on the
texting me
call.
like crazy.
And I'm like,
you're like, fuck him. He's gaslighting you. All this
yeah,
shit.
he's
And I
flipping
was
it back
like,
on you. Say no, tell him no. Like,
Yeah.
but I don't know how effective that was.
It's hard to concentrate on a lot of things at once.
Yeah, for anybody. Yeah, you figured it out pretty quickly when you had the missing information, if I recall.
I did. Honestly, there was enough things. When your New York Times article came out, that was actually one of the things that was a red flag. At that point, I just remember I never go on Facebook. I never went on social media. I was in such a state of just hyperdrive, doing things at all times. I had no version of social media or anything or relaxing in my life. So I don't know what made me go on there, but that was when the Me Too movement was happening. And yours post was like the first or second one that popped up. I just remember seeing that and opening it and being like, what the fuck is this? And like, just remember reading it and having just like, honestly, like very deep sadness and very strong relief, thinking we tried, but it's over. And just feeling very like good about that, honestly. And that's when I called Mark and I was like, Mark, there's branding going on. That's not good. And, he basically justified it to me the way it was probably justified to him. And I was like, okay, I guess so. And I said what I didn't think was okay about it. And he had responses. So I went with it, but it didn't feel right. And that, among a few other things, I think were the red flags for me. So when I finally got that piece of information, after hearing all the ways Doss was justified or this or that, everything clicked. And I was like, I get it. And then I just, was just processing that for the next year.
So we extended our question-making decisions to our Patreon audience. And they had many questions. And I sent you some screenshots of some of them.
Yeah, I saw this.
And a lot of them were just like, no questions, but there's just things like, she's a rock star. She's amazing. She's an inspiration. Sabrina says, give her a hug.
You've got some fans. Yeah. You got a lot of fans on our Patreon.
Elizabeth Adams says, I'm 57. I want to be like Isabella when I grow up.
That's so sweet.
We thought that was so sweet.
Yeah, that was a difficult conversation with Mark, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
I was surprised at how calm I looked on screen because in my brain, like I had literally been out only a few days. I was in hyperdrive. My body, my brain was just like going crazy. I got in a concussion, I think a couple months before from getting hit by a car at V Week. I was told to EM it, so I didn't get treated. It was a crazy fucking time.
I saw that in your statement.
Yeah.
You got hit by a car and they told you to get an EM?
I was doing the triathlon at V Week, right? And it was very poorly marked, I think, maybe was part of it. But I was going very fast down a very steep hill and a car didn't see me and kind of just very, very slowly like turned in front of me. And at the very last minute, I realized I'm not going to get out of this guy's way. And I just like hit the back of his car and like flip over it and all that. And I don't know how someone was looking out for me because I was absolutely fine. I get up thinking my arm's going to be broken, and I was okay. A couple people riding the triathlon like got up to help me, and I remember at that point thinking like, okay, I'm going to have to keep going then. And then like, you know what, maybe I won't finish. And they're like, yeah, no, don't finish. But at that point we were all pushing so much, that I was like, is it bad if I don't finish? Like, am I indulging my body?
Oh my God.
But luckily I was wearing a helmet. But the guy who I collided with drove me back to to the camp and dropped me off. He seemed really worried. But basically, yeah, one of the doctors, actually, I asked like a couple days later, because I was not feeling well. I asked him what the symptoms of the concussion were. And he said, I don't think you're having a concussion, and suggested that I EM it instead. I was very
Wow.
confused
Wow.
about what that even meant.
So negligent.
Mind over matter got taken to a very dangerous level.
Yeah, it absolutely.
This is the golden age of cult recovery. The more we speak up and share our stories, the more we realize we are not alone. Your voice and your story can empower others. This is Sarah, and I'm proud to be a founding collaborator of the #IGotOut movement. Learn more at igotout.org.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Jenny Ellison from our Patreon has a question. Who was your biggest support as you left? How are you now? And do you think Mark will ever leave? Oh, and I love your art.
I'd say at different phases of me leaving, I had different people that were, there for me that I don't think I could have done without. They were all instrumental. Like my friend who got me out, I stayed with her for 2 weeks. She made the effort to see me while I was there, gave me information despite, probably maybe being worried on some level that I would, turn around and tell Nancy, tell whoever. Keith was in Mexico at this time, it was pretty crazy. And actually, Kareem was with them at the time, and the film crew. She had basically this conversation with her happened with her and 5 people and a camera crew that were just all eating at the end of a long day of shooting. But, he was, one of them said, how do you know she's not, a bad guy? And she's like, no, she's not. How can you, I don't even put that in my brain. And that was, without her, I don't know how much longer I would have been there. I don't know if I would have seen what was going on so clearly. And she was amazing. She was instrumental in getting me out and making sure that I was okay, being a voice of reason and being supportive. And just, she had a lot going on in her life also, between work and projects and the fact that she was dealing with all of this herself, only being recently out also. And she was amazing. My sister helped me move out, drove me back to Albany, right before New Year's, because my mom was like, get the rest of your shit out now. You have to go. So my sister just, helped me. And she's been really amazing and understanding when I think a lot of people haven't understood. And everyone else who was able to wake up and get out, and you guys and Mark and Bonnie I talked with, after leaving. And you shared resources, you provided support and clarity about what was going on. And as I brought up things that they said or the ways that they said them, you were able to point out that doesn't correlate or that's not okay, or that's gaslighting. And I wasn't able to see that, some of those things, being so close to it, so in the bubble of it still. And it's just, I think it takes a village sometimes. And I was very lucky in that transition out and back into just, normal life, I guess. And it wasn't normal at the time, but having a mix of people who were there for me in different ways and filled in those gaps that I wasn't able to fill in myself. And then honestly, the vow people. I think it was very empowering to be able to talk about things after being so gaslit, being in such a state of self-doubt for so long. Someone asked me, like, you got in through a documentary, you dealt with all this there. Why would you want to do another one? And I just fell into it. But doing that and having people who understood the situation and were empathetic to it and knowledgeable about it was so validating and so, I think, critical to my healing at that time.
And we spoke at the trial when I saw you, when I last saw you in person. And it seemed like a pretty healthy group of people that understood what they were looking at. And part of the reason I went to the trial was just to make sure people were being tended to properly.
Did you approve?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew a lot of people were going to come out of the woodwork. And then, I also knew that some of those people that came out of the woodwork were at odds with each other. And it was kind of some petty stuff going on.
In terms of people who were
who
still
had left and were still traumatized and had an axe to grind with Keith, but they weren't getting along and disapproving of how people were leaving and criticizing each other. And I just didn't want, you and a few other people to be in the crossfire.
There's a lot of drama even on the other side, Isabella. I'm not sure how much of that you're privy to, but we could do a whole podcast on that, but we won't.
I don't think so.
That's good. High ground.
Just leave that one alone.
Yes, we'll definitely leave that one alone. Oh, yes. I mean, a lot of people ask about your healing journey and your art and what you've been doing and how you're doing.
Yeah. Right now, I'm doing okay. It's been a really long few years. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you guys, you had other things going on, I think, when you left too, and you had something to focus on, and you had the kid, Troy. But I don't know. Getting out was difficult. I was very isolated, and I had gone off of meds. I was just in a constant state of disassociation, and I've learned a lot more about different parts of my neurological system other than Tourette's, since being in a cult and dealing with all of the effects of that and how intertwined everything is. But just physically, mentally, I was sleeping, 4 hours a night. I was working out 6 hours a day. I was not eating nearly enough for most of the time I'd been there. I just started eating again, but was still dealing with the very disordered nature of it, thinking I was being indulgent anytime I ate anything, and also acknowledging that my body was like breaking down, like I wasn't doing well. I was just in such a severe state of fight or flight all the time that I couldn't think straight. I literally couldn't see straight. So much of my mind and body had been affected, and being in such a state of survival mode, just physically, let alone mentally, it makes it difficult. It affects every part of your life. It affected every part of mine. So after that first year of just like intellectually processing everything, being at home where I think my parents, are amazing, love me very much and care very much, but didn't have the tools to care for me during that time, it was very difficult. And once I moved out, I took much more of a somatic approach and was just trying to honor what my body needed at any given time. And that was very difficult also. But that was the thing that I think made the biggest difference. And I'm still working on that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still dealing with the effects of all of that on a daily basis. I'm trying to keep myself out of fight or flight. It takes a lot just to make sure I stay regulated. It's a constant kind of conscious and subconscious effort to just get through the day, get through tasks. Being on the go all the time in NXIVM kind of left its triggers with me, and driving anywhere. Honestly, I would just be having panic attacks up until a year ago, just from being on the go. It's just, there's a lot of NXIVM left a residual issues in my life that I didn't deal with before that have kind of intertwined with all of the ones I had previously. So I'm dealing with that. And I feel like I'm doing a lot better than I was, but it's still an effort. I'm working through it.
What's your self-care routine?
It varies. I think it was hard to have a clear head being in Albany. So constantly seeking any kind of growth in extremes made it hard to have a grounded approach to healing and growth on the other side of it. So I would, try all these different things, think I needed to go all or nothing, be very confused about how to go about it. So at this point, I'm just trying to, on a daily basis, just meet myself where I'm at and just be kinder to myself about not meeting goals and objectives. And I think it looks different every day. I'm just trying to trust the process because for so long I judged it and tried to fix it or tried to change it or assumed it shouldn't be like that. And it was very counterproductive. So if sometimes healing looks like staying up late and just allowing that in myself because I'm still trying to learn to get to bed earlier, that's okay. Stay up late. That's not the thing I need to worry about right now. Or if it's something else, it's something else. And just learning to be flexible with myself after such extreme structure and, kind of a false discipline, more of a controlled and rigid approach to everything that was not helpful. I'd say just trying to be adaptive in any given day and listen to my body, whatever that means, is my approach to healing right now.
Hey there, listener. Hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're remembering to hydrate, stretch, and unclench your jaws. Sometimes listening to conversations about heavy topics can really make you tighten up, And remember, A Little Bit Culty loves you. Also, come hang out with us on Patreon after you finish this episode. It's fun over there. Fun is good. And now, here's a brief message from our sponsors.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Where does your art fit into all that?
My relationship with art changed a lot in NXIVM. It was always something that I was always involved in it in some way. My parents were very creative. I grew up drawing and painting and went to school for it. But being in survival mode, being in fight or flight, makes it hard to be in a creative place, in a creative state of mind. So I think in the vow I mentioned, I held up some paintings and said, these are the ones I made, when I stopped finishing paintings around that time. And I used to, spend hours just finding the right tone of paint, the right texture on the canvas. And I think when you're in a state of doing and more and function and it's hard to just be, and it's hard to be in a creative place. And I think a lot of people, when I was there, didn't understand that. I was in the arts goals lab and everything. And I would keep telling people, I don't feel connected to this. I don't want to be doing this. I feel very conflicted. I don't want to be doing art. And then they would convince me to stay. And then I would leave again. But they're like, well, you keep coming back. Clearly it's something you want to be doing. And it was very difficult to wrap my head around what was going on because I didn't understand the nature of the abuse. And I thought it was just me because I'm going crazy, whatever is happening. And art became very triggering. And that's hard as being something that I connected with so much. It was a form of expression, a form of something I identified with so deeply. I still don't feel connected to it in the way that I did, though I love everything I've made. So that's been difficult, trying to kind of assess my identity almost, because you're not who you were before, but you don't necessarily feel whole now. So whoever that person is after you've left a situation like this, it takes a lot of introspection and kind of a lot of work to understand how you relate to things in a healthy way again, or in any way again. And I think that with the OCD being so entwined in my experience in NXIVM and so like affected by, like, my OCD got a lot worse, which I've heard is common in cults, that a lot of people have more obsessive or compulsive tendencies or develop it. It made it very bad. So I think working in art became very triggering, and also became like this, like, it felt more compulsive than creative. So I actually found a lot of kind of joy, and I found a really great community in actually swing dancing. And like
Wow.
open mics, and and like more performance-based things that were more ephemeral kind of arts that you don't have to obsess over because the moment's over, And I think moving my body in really healthy, like expressive, like not super structured and like ESP related, like XOSO kind of ways was so healthy. And it was social. Because I was doing that so much. I thought it was helpful. It wasn't. It was probably because it was so intertwined with all the ideology also. But,
Right.
I'm still working through or trying to figure out how I relate to my art. Like, I love everything I've made, but I think part of being an artist is recognizing the ebbs and flows of it. And an artist isn't painting 24 hours a day. That doesn't mean they're not an artist. So, what's a few years sometimes if it
for
helps
sure.
you come back to what you need.
Well, I would imagine also, and I don't do art in that way, but it's such an expression of yourself. And if yourself's been kind of fucked with and tampered with and fragmented, it's going to take a minute to put those pieces back together. And that is a process and does take work. And unfortunately, that's what we thought we were doing in NXIVM. So I think for a lot of us on the other side, the process of healing can be also a little triggering. So we don't know what to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, because if you're taking the same approach you've been in, it's not always a kind one after a group like that. So you can't mean yourself into doing art.
Yes.
You can't like punish yourself into, I guess some people can, but it didn't work for me.
Well, I have a very close friend that I've known since way before NXIVM. Now I'm going to cry because she's been so supportive. Maya Seuss, who also listens to all the podcasts. So hi, Maya, and thank you. And she heard something, I forget which episode, but she texted me afterwards. She's like, please go eat some cake and don't feel guilty. I'm like, can it be gluten-free, please? And she gave me permission to, because I never did the calorie counting thing. That wasn't my thing, but I definitely was obsessed with being thin. That was, part of the culture for sure of NXIVM. And she was like, just enjoy it. I wanted to share that with you to say, like, I give you permission, like Maya gave me permission to, do the things that would definitely have been indulgent if Nancy found out, like taking a hot bath and going for long walks and, just doing all the you could do self-care all day and it's totally fine.
You can.
In my opinion.
And it might be a little bit indulgent. You gotta, well, it's funny.
Okay.
My response was totally different. I felt I needed to find a structure and a discipline that I knew that previously worked for me.
Yeah, you went to the gym hard.
Yeah, I did. I can't even fit into my suits. But it's
So
different.
buff.
It's case by case. It's case by case, right?
Yeah. I mean, my first few years out, I needed flexibility after such extreme structure.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. Yeah.
And now I feel like I need structure again. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that without throwing myself like backwards in progress.
Well, you were closer to the epicenter of abuse, which was structured abuse. I was disheartened by the organization because it wasn't achieving any of the things that it professed to achieve. There was no applicable results to the world that I could see in my life. The only thing that actually I felt like I could cite was the Tourettes, was helping people with their Tourettes, ironically, but it was abusive and it wasn't doing that. So for me, I needed something that was related to the culture of our society that was tangible. You were like, I'm done with this structure because it's abusive, and structures when they go wrong get abusive, right?
Yeah. I just literally couldn't do it anymore. If I didn't have a home to come back to, I don't know what I would have done.
Well, that's ultimately what happens. The structures fail because they are abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a good point. I meant to say that earlier, Nep, that like the way you described what happened with Nancy, like in many ways, even though you were there a shorter period of time than Nippy and I, you definitely got your head messed with more than Nippy and I.
You got a concentrated dose of the abuse. Ours was trickled out over 10 years because we were peripheral.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember working with Nancy the first time I worked with her, and I was thinking, the first session, I was like, I know why Mark called her a bitch. It was just terrible. Yeah, because she was
she
so
could
like
be.
rude and so like direct in ways that I like thought afterwards, okay, was that direct? But in the moment, it's just like, you're being a dick right now.
Yeah,
And
she
then
could
she was
be a real
like,
dick.
yeah, and she just stopped and she was like, you know what? I was like crying and like with the fucking EKG thing on my head or whatever. And she's just like, you know what? You need curriculum, and like leaves the room. I'm just like, what is going on right now? And then we just did modules, like 2 a day, and then I would work with her. Like that was day one. Day one.
And the way you described her hot cold thing, I totally get that. Like, you know how many times she'd be like, no, you do this and I'll work with you. Like I'm there for you. And then she just was never available.
Oh yeah. Well, as soon as my symptoms stopped being so obvious, she just refused to work with me, and she would keep me on a carrot. Like she asked me at one point when people were leaving, can you find out about this person or what they're doing? Like,
She asked you to
study
spy.
wise. Kind of, she seemed like she was concerned. I was just like one person at the time, just see how they're doing. Are they back on meds or whatever? And she says, if you do that, I'll work with you.
What?
And I was like, okay. And then she never worked with me. It was just, it was constant carrot on a stick kind of thing. Like in public, she would tell people. I remember she was working with someone with Crohn's disease towards the end. And she we're in the gymnast room and she's sitting down and she goes, she's talking to this young girl she's just starting to work with. And she's like, you know what? Isabella was one of the first people I worked with medical stuff and OCD and blah, blah, blah. And, I've learned so much from her and she's being so sweet. And I'm like, what is going on? Because like, I was embarrassed. I felt like ashamed because, I don't know what's going on. And she was like, yeah, you just like Isabella knows anytime she wants to work with me, I'm at her disposal. I'm available. I'm like,
Oh my God.
how did I mess this up? Because I'm never able to get a hold of her. What am I doing wrong? Yeah.
Of course you thought that must be your fault.
Yeah.
Not that she overpromises.
Nope.
Well, we are so grateful that you decided to do your first post-vow interview with us. It's a real honor. I've never seen our Patreon listeners get so excited about a guest.
They were all over it. Some want to buy your art. They want to know if it's for sale.
Oh yeah.
So let us know.
Oh yeah.
Let us know.
For sale.
We'll put a link on it.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Show notes.
Yeah, show notes.
Anything that we didn't cover that you want people to know before we wrap it up?
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. There's so much, but very, very healing.
It is.
Good. That's what most people have said, but especially ex-NXIVM members. Karen Hunter-Einer's episode with us was one of our favorites for sure. And I think for her too, it was healing. So it's always good,
great.
especially for so many years of like not being allowed to speak freely,
Yeah. It's like you're finding your bearings again.
Yeah. And you don't have to worry about speaking honorably.
Yeah. That was a shit show to work through. I'm still figuring that one out sometimes. I'm like, how do you get your personality back and all the feisty things that were a part of you? I'm still trying to get that back.
You gotta let rip.
Listen to our podcast.
Yeah, that's what I gotta do. That's true. I should go to the extreme with that one and then
and ask for forgiveness later.
If you go too far, just remind people that you have Tourette's, right?
That's true.
I forgive you already.
It's my Tourette.
You're forgiven already.
Yeah. You have an easy out. Well, you look great and you sound great. And it's just such a joy to reconnect. I forgot that you guys saw each other in person. So I want to be next. Please come visit us in Atlanta. We have a guest room.
Yeah.
And until then,
you guys.
Thank you, Isabella. You're awesome.
Thank you, Isabella.
This podcast is brought to you by Citizens of Sound, a podcast production agency committed to developing and launching shows with gravity and depth. From conception to launch, Citizens will partner with you every step of the way, whether you're an actor, business owner, doctor, fitness coach, hairstylist, or influencer. Connection is the future of communication. Jump on board with Citizens of Sound today and start your show. Go to citizensofsound.com and follow them on Instagram. And trust me, it'll be a really good decision for you.
Well, that was a long one, so we will save our debrief and perhaps even a live Q&A with Isabella over on our Patreon feed.
Yeah, she's doing great.
We're really proud of her. Isabella, thank you for being so brave enough to talk with us. Thank you to our lawyers for permitting it.
It's a story that has been turned into wisdom, so thank you, Isabella.
Please check out her art and life and various links in our show notes. Follow her on Instagram. And don't forget to leave us a voicemail if you have any questions or any comments about this episode. And hope you're having a great summer. Bye for now.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Hope you liked this episode. Let's keep the conversation going and come hang out with us on Patreon, where we keep the tape rolling each week with special episodes just for Patreon subscribers and where we get deep into the weeds of unpacking every episode of The Vow.
And if you're looking for our show notes or some sweet, sweet swag or official ALBC podcast merch or a list of our most recommended cult recovery resources, visit our website at alittlebitculty.com.
And for more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, narrated by my wife, and at most bookstores.
A Little Bit Culty is a Talkhouse podcast and a Trace 120 production. We're executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, with writing, research, and additional production support by senior producer Jess Tardy. We're edited, mixed, and mastered by our rocking producer Will Rutherford of Citizens of Sound, and our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Thank you for listening.